Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'll be talking about one of the most influential folk songs in American music history, Goodnight Irene. Although the song itself is much older, it became a nationwide hit in 1950 when it was recorded by the Weavers with an orchestral arrangement by Gordon Jenkins. Their version helped introduce traditional American folk music to millions of listeners and change the direction of popular music in the United States. Firstly, I'll discuss the artist behind the recording, then analyze the music elements of the song, explain why it became such a success, talk about the controversy surrounding the Weavers during the Red Scare, and finally discuss why the song continues to matter today. Okay, starting with the Weavers and Gordon Jenkins. The Weavers were an American folk group formed in New York City in 1948. The original members were Pete Seeger, Lee Hayes, Ronnie Gilbert, and Fred Hellerman. Before the Weavers, folk music was usually considered something performed in small communities or passed down through generations rather than being heard on the radio. Their goal was to bring traditional American folk songs to a wider audience while preserving the storytelling and simplicity that made folk music unique. Their performances combined close vocal harmonies with simple acoustic accompaniment, creating a style that was easy to enjoy, easy for people who have never listened to folk music before. They drew from American folk traditions, labor songs, spirituals, blues, and songs from many different cultures. Their approach made folk music feel fresh while still respecting its roots. One of the people who helped make Goodnight Irene a commercial success was Gordon Jenkins. Jenkins was already well known as a composer, arranger, and orchestra leader during the 1940s and 50s. He worked with many of the biggest singers of the era, including Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, and later even on Johnny Cash. His trademark style featured rich string arrangements and warm orchestral accompaniments that gave recordings a polished, emotional sounds. When Gordon Jenkins collaborated with the Weavers on Goodnight Irene, he blended their simple folk performance with a full orchestra. The combination allowed the recording to appeal to both folk audiences and mainstream pop listeners. Instead of sounding like an old traditional folk recording, it sounded modern enough for radio stations across America. The result was extraordinary. Released in 1950, Goodnight Irene reached number 1 on the Billboard charts and remained there for an incredible 13 weeks. It became one of the biggest selling songs of the year and introduced millions of Americans to folk music. So the story behind the song now. Although many people associate Goodnight Irene with the Weavers, they did not write it. The song is closely connected with Lead Belly, whose real name was Huddie Ledbetter. Lead Belly learned different versions of the song during his life and helped preserve it through his performances and recordings during the 1930s and 40s. Since the song had been passed down orally for many years, its exact origins aren't completely known. I've looked, and different versions existed long before Lead Belly recorded it. Lead Belly's performances reflected Southern folk and blues traditions. His recordings were simple, emotional, and personal. The Weavers kept the melody and the spirit of the original song, but presented it in a way that appealed to a much broader audience. Now, for the musical analysis. Let's look at the musical elements that made Goodnight Irene so memorable, starting with the rhythm. The rhythm is a slow, relaxed, and steady, easy to hear sound. It almost sounds like a lullaby. There aren't any complicated rhythmic patterns or sudden changes in tempo. Because of this simple beat, listeners could easily sing along, which is one reason folk music has traditionally been shared from person to person. The rhythm creates a peaceful, comforting feeling that matches the song's reflective lyrics. Melody. The melody is smooth, gentle, and highly memorable. It stays within a comfortable vocal range, making it easy for ordinary people to sing without special training. Many phrases repeat through the song, helping listeners remember the tune only after hearing it once or twice. The simplicity is one of the defining characteristics of traditional folk music. Next up, the harmony. Harmony is one of the recording's strongest musical features. Instead of having only one singer perform the melody, the Weavers sing in close vocal harmony throughout much of the song. Each member contributes a different vocal part, creating a warm, full sound. Gordon Jenkins builds on these harmonies and adds strings and orchestral accompaniments underneath the voices. His arrangement doesn't overpower the singers, but instead supports them, making the song sound richer and more emotional than earlier versions. The balance between folk vocals and orchestral instruments help make the recording attractive to mainstream audiences who are more familiar with pop music. After that's the form. The song follows a very simple structure. It begins with a verse, followed by a familiar chorus that repeats Irene, good night, don't take my singing voice into Consideration here, I'm not that good. Additional verses will follow after, ending with another chorus. This verse and chorus form creates repetition, making the song very easy to remember and encouraging audiences to sing along. Next is the dynamics. Most of the song's performance remains soft and gentle. Rather than relying on dramatic volume changes, the song gradually builds during the chorus before returning to a quieter sound in the verses. These small crescendos create emotional warmth without being overwhelming. The timbre refers to the unique quality or color of a sound. The Weavers' voices have a natural, relaxed folk song rather than a polished operatic style. The acoustic guitar provides a simple foundation, while Jenkins' orchestra adds strings and other instruments that create a fuller texture. Compared with Leadbelly's earlier recordings, this version sounds so much smoother, richer, and more refined while maintaining the song's emotional honesty. Now, time to talk about communism. The Red Scare and the communist controversy. Although Goodnight Irene was emotionally successful, the Weavers' career soon became caught up in one of the most controversial periods in American history. During the late 40s and 50s, the United States experienced what became known as the Red Scare. Many Americans feared that communists were trying to influence the government, labor unions, education, and the entertainment industry. Government investigations, including hearings led by House Un-American Activities Committee, questioned thousands of people about their political beliefs and associations. Several members of the Weavers had previously supported labor movements, civil rights causes, and other progressive organizations. Pete Seeger and Lee Hayes had also been involved with political groups during the 30s and 40s. Some members had past associations with the Communist Party, actually, while some others performed at events connected to left-wing organizations at the time. Although no evidence showed that the Weavers were involved in espionage or crimes against the United States, simply being associated with a communist organization was often enough to damage their careers past that period. As a result, radio stations stopped playing their music. Concert venues canceled their performances, television appearances disappeared, and record sales declined sharply. The group was effectively blacklisted by much of the entertainment industry. Pete Seeger was later called before Congress and refused to answer questions about his political beliefs and personal associations, arguing that Americans should have the freedom to hold their own opinions without government interference. He was convicted of contempt of Congress in 1961, although that conviction was overturned in appeal several years later. The pressure from the blacklist eventually led the Weavers to break up for a time, despite the enormous popularity of Goodnight Irene. Looking back today, many historians see the blacklist as a period when fear and political suspicion limited freedom of expression in the arts. While people still debate the political beliefs of some performers, many agree that blacklisting musicians simply because of their associations had a lasting negative effect on American culture. So why was Goodnight Irene so successful? Well, there were a lot of factors that contributed to the song's popularity. Firstly was the melody being simple and memorable. Secondly, the emotional lyrics connected with listeners. Third, Gordon Jenkins' orchestral arrangement made traditional folk music sound familiar to pop audiences. And finally, the song was released only a few years after World War II. Many Americans were looking for comforting, familiar music during a time of adjustment and uncertainty. Goodnight Irene offered exactly that. It appealed to older listeners who appreciated traditional songs while also introducing younger audiences to folk music. Now, why is the song so important? Even more than 70 years later, Goodnight Irene remains one of the most important recordings in American folk music. The recording proved that traditional folk songs could become major commercial successes without completely losing their original character. It also helped launch the American folk revival that became popular during the late 1950s and 1960s. Artists such as Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and many others were influenced by the Weavers' ability to bring folk music into the mainstream. The recording also helped preserve Leadbelly's musical legacy by introducing his version of the song to millions of people who have otherwise might have never heard it before. Now today, Goodnight Irene continues to be performed by folk musicians across the world and remains a reminder of America's rich musical heritage. Now, to wrap up, in conclusion, Goodnight Irene is much more than a popular song from the 1950s. It represents the meeting of traditional American folk music and commercial popular music. Gordon Jenkins' orchestral arrangements and the Weavers' vocal harmonies transformed an old folk song into one of the biggest hits of an era. At the same time, the story of the Weavers reminds us that music does not exist separately from history. Their success, followed by the blacklisting during the Red Scare, shows how politics and culture truly shaped the careers of even the most successful artists. More than 70 years later, Goodnight Irene is remembered not only because of its beauty melody, but because it helped preserve American folk traditions while influencing generations of musicians who followed afterwards. Thank you very much for listening. Before I finish, I have two discussion questions that I'd like for you guys to answer. Number one, folk music was once one of America's most popular genres. Why do you think it's much less common today on the Billboard charts, and when do you think that decline began? Number two, when artists perform traditional songs, should they modernize them to reach new audiences, or should they keep them close to their original versions as possible? Let me know, and have a great day. Thank you very much.